Every time Emily pushed open the oak door of their small house in Ballard, a quiet neighborhood on Seattle's waterfront, she was greeted by the faint aroma of freshly roasted coffee. It wasn't the bold, charred scent you'd find at big chain cafes, but a gentle, warm fragrance that felt like an invisible hug from the house itself. It was the smell of the hand-roasted beans she and Ryan bought from a tiny shop near Pike Place Market, where they used to spend lazy weekends watching the crowds and dreaming of their future. Their home, with its pale blue walls and the soft glow of an antique chandelier in the living room, was the sanctuary Emily had carefully crafted. It was her refuge after long days in downtown Seattle, where she worked as an HR specialist for a fast-growing tech company specializing in artificial intelligence and big data. Emily, 34, had honey blonde hair often tied back in a neat ponytail and sharp green eyes that sparkled like the waters of Puget Sound on a sunny day. She prided herself on her ability to read people's emotions, a skill honed over years in human resources. Her job was a delicate dance of empathy and firmness. A single day might involve mediating a dispute between two engineers arguing over credit for an idea, meeting with executives about diversity policies, or comforting a young employee facing a layoff. She loved the work, not just because it challenged her mind, but because it gave her a sense of control, as if she could tidy up even the messiest of human emotions, much like she organized the spice jars in her cozy kitchen. But what Emily loved most was coming home to Ryan, her husband of 10 years, and Max, their golden Labrador, whose tail wagged like a tireless fan. Ryan, 36, was a software engineer with a fierce passion for coding. Tall and lanky, with unruly black hair that Emily teased as genius-level bedhead, he had a smile that could put anyone at ease. When he wasn't hunched over a computer screen writing complex code, Ryan liked strumming old Nirvana or Pearl Jam songs on his beat-up guitar tunes that felt like Seattle's heartbeat, or watching Seattle Mariners baseball games with Emily, munching popcorn and cheering when the team scored. They'd met over a decade ago on a rainy afternoon at Pike Place Market. Emily, struggling to control Max, a rambunctious puppy back then, had let him dart through the crowd, knocking over Ryan's latte as he waited in line for salmon. Instead of getting mad, Ryan laughed, knelt to pet Max and joked, "This little guy must want me to buy him a coffee." That clumsy moment led to their first date at a dive bar in Capitol Hill, then a lakeside wedding on Lake Washington, and eventually the life they'd built together in Ballard. Their house sat on a quiet street where maple trees blazed red every fall, and breezes from Puget Sound carried the briny scent of the sea. The backyard had a small garden where Emily grew lavender and a few apple trees, and Ryan had built a wooden swing one summer. Each morning, Max would sprawl under Seattle's weak sunlight, yawning lazily, while Emily and Ryan sipped coffee on the porch, gazing at the shimmering waters of the bay. They'd talk about small things, a new project at work, plans to watch 4th of July fireworks at Lake Union, or just the relentless drizzle of the Pacific Northwest. For Emily, this was the picture of a near-perfect life. A meaningful career, a loving husband, and a dog who could make her laugh with his goofy antics. But lately, Emily had sensed a shift. It wasn't obvious, not some glaring change, but a subtle chill, like a draft slipping through a cracked window. Ryan still flashed his familiar smile, still hugged her from behind as she washed dishes in their little kitchen. But his eyes seemed distant, as if he were somewhere she couldn't reach. Their evenings together grew quieter. Instead of chatting about their day, Ryan often sat silently, glued to his phone or laptop, claiming he was checking work emails. Max, with a dog's uncanny sensitivity, started curling up closer to Emily, his warm brown eyes watching her as if he knew something was off. Emily tried to brush off the unease. She told herself Ryan was just stressed from work. The tech industry in Seattle was notorious for its relentless pace, especially with his company vying for a major defense contract. But when she asked about his day, Ryan's answers were curt. "It's fine, Em. Just busy." His voice was flat, missing the spark she'd always known. The coffee scent still filled the house from the machine in the kitchen corner, but it no longer chased away the cold creeping into her heart. The shift became undeniable one Saturday morning in early October, when golden leaves blanketed Ballard's streets. Ryan woke earlier than usual, pulling on a grey jacket and grabbing his backpack. "I've got to head to the office today," he said, his voice even, avoiding Emily's eyes. "The company's in crunch mode for the Aurora project. I might be late." Emily nodded, forcing a smile, but her chest tightened. The word Aurora sounded vaguely familiar, like something he'd mentioned in passing, but she wasn't sure. When Ryan leaned to kiss her forehead and left, the door closed with a sharp click, leaving her in the morning's stillness. To shake off the unease, Emily decided to take Max for a walk in Ravenna Park, a 10-minute drive from home. The park was their haven, winding trails through pine forests, the chatter of birds mingling with rustling leaves, and the crisp air of autumn. Max, as always, bounded ahead, nose to the ground, tail wagging like a radar seeking treasure. Emily walked slowly, breathing in the scent of damp earth and pine sap, trying to anchor herself in the moment. She loved mornings like this, when the world seemed to pause, and she could forget the pressures of work, endless emails, tense meetings, and nights spent alone in the living room waiting for Ryan. But that day, her mind kept drifting to him. She replayed his recent late nights, often past midnight, with excuses like emergency team meetings or debugging code. She recalled his eyes when she asked about work, not the exhaustion of overwork, but a guarded distance she couldn't decipher. She told herself she was imagining things, that every marriage had rough patches. But the unease grew, like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. Suddenly Max stopped beneath an ancient oak, barking insistently. Emily approached, assuming he'd found a squirrel or a stray leaf. But under the blanket of leaves, she spotted something glinting, a small, worn black USB drive, unlabeled. She picked it up, brushing off the dirt with her sleeve, and glanced around. The park was empty, save for the whisper of wind through the trees and a distant bird call. A strange sensation washed over her, as if she'd stumbled onto something she wasn't meant to find. She slipped the USB into her coat pocket, planning to check it later. But all the way home, it weighed heavy in her pocket, tugging at her thoughts. Max, sensing her tension, didn't romp as usual, but stayed close, his wet nose brushing her hand like a quiet comfort. Back home, Emily sank onto the couch, morning sunlight streaming through the window, illuminating dust motes in the air. The coffee scent lingered, but it no longer felt like peace. That evening, with Ryan still out, Emily pulled the USB from her pocket. She plugged it into her laptop, her heart pounding like a drum. The screen lit up, revealing encrypted files, technical notes filled with jargon she barely understood, terms like security protocols, data encryption, and Aurora system. But what stopped her cold was a folder of photos. She clicked, and the first image appeared. Ryan, standing beside a stranger, a woman with curly brown hair, wearing a teal sweater, both beaming in a bar. Her eyes held Ryan with a warmth that felt intimate, like they shared a secret no one else knew. The timestamp was from last week. Emily's blood ran cold. She scrolled through more files, desperate for answers. There were draft emails mentioning the Aurora project and a name that kept appearing, Claire. She racked her brain but couldn't recall Ryan ever mentioning a Claire. One scanned handwritten note in Ryan's familiar scrawl read, "Meet C at 8, Rusty Anchor. Don't let anyone know." Rusty Anchor was a bar in Capitol Hill, a place Ryan had never taken her. She closed the laptop, the screen's blue glow fading, leaving her in the living room's darkness. Max curled up at her feet, yawning, his brown eyes watching her as if promising to stay by her side. The next few days, Emily became obsessed with the USB. She noticed small things, Ryan checking his phone constantly, changing his laptop password for the first time ever. She checked his phone's search history when he dozed off on the couch, finding queries for Rusty Anchor and a downtown Seattle hotel. She told herself she was paranoid, that Ryan wasn't the cheating type. But every glance into his eyes revealed a gap she couldn't bridge. One evening, when he said he was meeting a colleague about the project, Emily couldn't hold back. "It's Claire, isn't it?" she asked, her voice icy. Ryan froze just for a moment, but it was enough to confirm she'd touched the truth. Emily couldn't tolerate the silence any longer. She had to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. She started digging, feeling like an unwilling detective in her own marriage. She checked Ryan's work email, left open on their shared desktop one rushed morning. She found a thread of brief messages with Claire, nothing overtly romantic, but laced with cryptic references to things to resolve and old matters to close. One message read, "See, we need to end this before it goes too far. Meet at RA, Friday." RA, Rusty Anchor, no doubt. She dug deeper, her stomach churning. She found an e-receipt for a Fremont coffee shop where Ryan had paid for 2 lattes, something he rarely did unless with her. She recalled nights he came home late, a faint whiff of unfamiliar perfume on his jacket, not hers, not the office's sterile scent. She felt her trust eroding, not just in Ryan but in herself. One evening, when Ryan claimed he was staying late at the office for an urgent bug fix, Emily acted. She pulled on a navy raincoat, tugged the hood up, and drove to his office in South Lake Union. But the building was dark, not a soul inside, only streetlights reflecting off wet glass. Her heart raced as she drove to Rusty Anchor in Capitol Hill, the bar from his note. Through the fogged windows, she saw Ryan in a corner booth, facing Claire. The woman from the photo was there in the flesh curly brown hair, a warm smile, eyes looking at Ryan like he was her whole world. They didn't hold hands, didn't touch. But the way Claire leaned toward him, the way Ryan nodded slowly, shattered Emily's heart. She stood outside, rain soaking through her coat, tears blending with the drops on her face. She wanted to burst in, scream, demand answers, but her feet felt glued to the sidewalk. Finally she drove home, her mind a storm. Max greeted her at the door, tail wagging softly, but even his presence couldn't ease the pain. She sank onto the couch, the lamp's light highlighting the tears still wet on her cheeks. The coffee scent in the house now felt like a bitter reminder of what she'd thought was real. When Ryan returned past midnight, drenched and weary, Emily couldn't hold back. She stood in the living room, the USB clutched in her hand, her gaze steady but trembling. "Who is she, Ryan?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. "Who's Claire? And why are you lying to me?" Ryan paled, his eyes widening as if caught red-handed. He slowly shed his coat, hanging it by the door, buying time. I'm not lying," he began, his voice low and cautious. "Claire's an old colleague from my San Francisco days. She reached out about a project we worked on together. It's more complicated than I expected." "Complicated enough to meet her behind my back?" Emily snapped, tossing the USB onto the wooden coffee table. It landed with a small clack, but the sound echoed like thunder in the silence. "I found this, Ryan. Pictures of you and her. Emails. Something about Aurora. Did you think I was too stupid to notice?" Ryan bowed his head, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. I don't think you're stupid, Em. I just didn't want to worry you. Aurora was an old project. An AI system we built years ago. It got scrapped, but recently there's been a legal issue over intellectual property. Claire contacted me because she's the only one with the original documents. I met her to sort it out, that's all. That's all? Emily's voice rose, tears streaming down her cheeks. You expect me to believe you're sneaking around with another woman over some documents? I saw how you looked at her, Ryan. I stood outside that bar in the rain watching you two laugh like I didn't exist. Ryan looked up, his eyes red, pain etched across his face. You followed me? His voice cracked, not with anger, but hurt. Em, I swear to you, there's nothing between me and Claire. She was part of my past, yes, but I chose you. I love you. I didn't want to hurt you, so I thought I could handle this without dragging you into it. But Ryan's words didn't soothe Emily's pain. She felt betrayed not just by the secret meetings, but by his lack of honesty, the cornerstone of their marriage. You made me feel like I'm not part of your life anymore, she said, her voice breaking. I don't know if I can trust you. She turned away, hiding her tears. Max, sensing the tension, nuzzled her leg, his wet nose a small comfort. Their home, once a haven, now felt like a stage for their unravelling. Ryan stepped forward, reaching for her shoulder, but Emily stepped back, shaking her head. I need time, Ryan, she whispered, her voice nearly gone. And so do you. The weeks after the confrontation were a limbo, as if Emily and Ryan were strangers sharing a house. Ryan tried to make amends. He cooked breakfast with pancakes and bacon, left apology notes in his messy scrawl on the kitchen counter, and spent more time at home, playing fetch with Max or watching old movies with Emily. But she couldn't shake the betrayal. Every glance into his eyes brought back Claire's smile, the secrets he'd kept. She wondered if she'd ever truly known him, or if their life had been a fiction she'd convinced herself to believe. She turned to Sarah, her best friend, meeting at the Whalewinds, a cosy Fremont coffee shop with rough brick walls and the aroma of fresh-baked bread. Over steaming lattes, Emily poured out everything: the USB, Rusty Anchor, the living room showdown. Sarah listened, her deep brown eyes filled with concern, her hands gripping her mug tightly. Em, I get why you're hurt, she said, her voice soft but firm. But I can see Ryan loves you. He messed up by hiding this. But do you think you two could work through it? Emily shook her head, tears leaving faint streaks on the wooden table. I don't know, Sarah. I want to believe him, but every time I think of him with her smiling, it feels like the ground's collapsing. I'm scared that if I forgive him, I'll just hurt myself again. Sarah suggested couples therapy, an idea Emily initially scoffed at. Sounds like something out of a Hollywood movie, she said, forcing a laugh to mask her pain. But as days passed and the silence with Ryan grew stifling, she reconsidered. She realized she didn't want to give up, not out of fear of loneliness, but because she still loved Ryan, even if that love was now shadowed by doubt and hurt. One evening, as they sat on the couch with Max sprawled between them, his head on Emily's lap, she spoke up. Ryan, I think we need help, she said, her voice trembling but resolved. If you want to fix this, we have to try. I don't want us to just exist side by side like ghosts. Ryan looked up, his eyes lighting with a hope she hadn't seen since that fateful night. I'll do anything, Em, he said, his voice low but certain. I don't want to lose you. I know I hurt you and I want to make it right. They began therapy with Ellen Harper, a middle-aged psychologist with silver hair pulled into a high bun, and a voice both gentle and incisive, as if she could see through any facade. The first sessions were tense, the air thick with unspoken words. They sat at opposite ends of Ellen's small office couch, a vast ocean between them. Ellen urged them to share what they'd kept bottled up, not to accuse, but to understand. Emily went first, her voice shaky as she spoke of her loneliness. "I always thought we were a team, Ryan," she said, staring at her clasped hands. "But these past months, I felt like I was losing you. You were so distant. And when I found out about Claire, I felt like I wasn't your priority anymore. I'm scared I'm not enough, that I did something to push you away." Ryan listened, his hands gripping the armrest, knuckles pale. When his turn came, he bowed his head, his voice heavy with regret. "I was wrong to hide things, Em," he said. "I thought I could handle Claire's issue myself, that it was just work. But I see now that by keeping you out, I pushed you away. I'm sorry for making you feel like you weren't enough, because you've always been everything to me." Therapy was a slow, painful journey, filled with tears, anger, and hard moments. But bit by bit, they learned to open up. Emily shared her fear of abandonment, the nights she lay awake wondering if Ryan still loved her. She talked about work pressures, days she felt like she was fighting alone in a cutthroat world. Ryan admitted the Aurora project had consumed him, and reconnecting with Claire stirred old memories not of love, but of being trapped between past and present. "But you're my present, Em," he said, meeting her eyes for the first time in weeks, his gaze raw with honesty. "And I want you to be my future." They rebuilt trust in small steps. Ryan shared his laptop and phone passwords, not because she asked, but to show he had nothing to hide. Emily, still wounded, tried to listen not just as a wife, but as a friend. They tackled tough questions. What had pulled them apart? What did they truly want from each other? Could they forgive not just the other, but themselves? Ravenna Park, where the secret began, became a place to reconnect. They walked Max together, not to avoid, but to face each other. In the fall afternoons, with golden leaves glinting under Seattle's faint sun, they talked about little things, a new Netflix show, plans to ski in Whistler, or the morning coffee's warmth. Max, tail wagging wildly, eyes bright with joy, seemed to bridge the gap between them. Some days they walked in silence, listening to leaves crunch and distant waves. But it wasn't heavy anymore. It was a silence of understanding. One evening, after moving to a new Ballard apartment overlooking Puget Sound and the Cascade Mountains, Ryan took Emily's hand. They sat on the porch, lights from passing ferries twinkling like stray stars. "I know we've been through hell, Em," he said, his voice warm with a sincerity she'd feared was gone. "But I believe we can rebuild, stronger than before. I'm not promising perfection, but I promise to be honest with you. Always. I want new memories together, not to erase the past, but to prove we're bigger than it." Emily smiled, feeling hope flicker for the first time in months. She squeezed his hand, his warmth spreading through her. "I want that too, Ryan," she said, her voice soft but sure. "But we take it one step at a time. I don't want to rush, only to hurt each other again." Max yawned, curling up at their feet, his head resting on Emily's leg as if content with the moment. The coffee scent drifted from the kitchen, mingling with the cool sea air and faint salt of the bay. Emily and Ryan's story didn't end with a fairy tale finish. They knew challenges lay ahead, days of doubt, moments of weakness, old scars that might ache. But they also knew their love, though tested, was worth fighting for. They weren't trying to go back to before, knowing the past had changed them forever. Instead, they looked forward, building a future where honesty and trust were the foundation. Months later, on a rare sunny Seattle morning, Emily stood in the kitchen, brewing coffee as always. Ryan wandered in, hair still mussed from sleep, and wrapped his arms around her, chin on her shoulder. "Where to today?" he asked, a playful lilt in his voice. "The park? Or a ferry to Bainbridge, just to see the water?" Emily laughed, turning to meet his eyes, her own sparkling with a lightness she'd thought was lost. "The park," she said. "Max will love running around, and I think we could use a day like that." Ryan nodded, his smile mirroring her joy. As they left, Max bounded ahead, tail wagging, leading the way to Ravenna Park. Leaves fell softly, the breeze carried autumn's breath, and somewhere in the air, the scent of coffee whispered that everything would be all right.